Hello, we are at Act 4, Scene 2 of Macbeth. Okay, here we go. If you recall, Scene 1 ended with Macbeth deciding to do this horrible thing right here. This is a part in the play that is going to be awful because of this. This is the hardest part for me to watch. Some movies and stage performances don't even show this part anymore because it's so awful. In Elizabethan times and Shakespeare's time, the audiences, from what I've read, didn't really care about that and were okay with seeing this horrible thing on stage. It also makes the next scenes kind of more intense. So we'll see. Okay, but he just made that plan. So now the setting changes to Macduff's castle. Remember Macduff, Thane of Fife, who is gone to England to try to see if Malcolm and the King of England and other people can gather together to overthrow Macbeth. Okay, so we meet Macduff's wife, who's just called Lady Macduff, her son, who's not named, and this guy Ross, this other, remember, he's been around the whole time. He's one of those, guys, supporters of the king, kind of always goes around with him. Okay, so Lady Macduff is talking to Ross and says, what had he done to make him fly the land? Why did he leave? Okay, so she's upset that he left right there. You can see. Ross says, you have to have patience. And she's saying, he didn't have any. His flight was madness. He just left us, okay? Our fears make us traitors. You know not, Ross says, whether it was his wisdom or his fear. Did he leave for England because he was afraid of Macbeth? No, he was not afraid of Macbeth. He left because he wanted to try to save his country. But she scoffs at that. Wisdom to leave his wife, leave his babes, his mansion, his titles, and a place from whence himself does fly. He's leaving us all unprotected, is what she's saying. That's not very wise. He loves us not. Seems true, right? He doesn't even love us. How does he leave us all here in this horrible country where everybody's being, executed and accused of treason and all these things? He wants the natural touch. He's not natural, okay? He should be staying in the nest, and he's not. He runs against reason, okay? Ross is trying to calm her down and saying, hey, I pray you school yourself, but for your husband he is noble, wise, judicious, he best knows. I dare not speak much further. Everyone's afraid to talk in this climate, right? There's spies everywhere, okay? So Ross is like, I don't really want to keep saying, but really, trust me, he's not a bad guy, okay? We shouldn't just trust to rumors that we fear. Okay. Now he says, I'll take my leave of you. Shall not be long. I'll be here again. He wants to leave. But she says, oh, and then here we have the son. Okay, so he's talking about here. And she says, he's fathered yet fatherless. Okay. Because he has a father, but his father's not present. Okay. And Ross says, I am so much a fool. Should I stay longer? It would be my disgrace and your discomfort. What that means is he's so kind of sensitive and sad about this situation that he's afraid he's going to start crying, and that would be disgraceful and make Lady Macduff uncomfortable. Okay, so then Ross leaves. Now Lady Macduff is talking to her son, and she says, she tells him that his father's dead. Okay, and she says, this is a weird scene with his son. He says, I'll live like birds do. He's like, I'll figure it out. Okay. And then he says, my father's not dead. And she says, yes, he is. And they have this kind of back and forth where he says, how are you going to get a husband? And she's just kind of, I don't know if she's trying to cheer him up or be joking. It's all very strange. This part's interesting. He asks, was my father a traitor? And Lady Macduff says, yeah. And he says, what's a traitor? And he says, one that swears and lies. Are all traitors, is that what all traitors are? And he goes, yeah, everyone that swears and lies is a traitor and must be hanged. Okay, and must they all be hanged that swear and lie? Yeah. Who hangs them? The honest men. And the son says, well, then the liars and swearers are fools, for there are liars and swearers enough to beat the honest men and hang them up. A strange comment on good and evil and government, and I don't know. Anyway, she goes on to talk about what he's going to do for her father. They have that scene. Then a messenger comes in, okay? And he is coming, what's he coming here to do? Look at this. Bless you, fair dame, I am not to you known, though in your state of honor I am perfect. I doubt some danger does approach you nearly. If you will take a homely man's advice, be not found here. Hence with your little ones. Okay, I'm sorry to frighten you like this. It's too savage. But to do worse would be even more cruelty. I dare abide no longer, and he leaves. Do you get what this was? This is one of Macbeth's guys who knows the plan is to come massacre the whole castle. And he risks everything because, as just a human, that's so awful. And he goes and tells the wife to get out of there. But she doesn't. Where should I go? She says, whither should I fly? I've done no harm. This is a great line, though. But I remember now, I am in this earthly world where to do harm is often laudable, meaning praiseworthy, and to do good sometimes accounts dangerous folly. Ooh, ain't that the truth? All right. So she says, why then do I put up that womanly defense to say I've done no harm? She realized how stupid it is to say, why should I go? I've done nothing wrong. She's like, oh, yeah, I live on earth where it doesn't add up. People who do harm are fine sometimes. Okay, now comes the horrible part. You can see who's coming in. More murderers. All right. And they say, where's your husband? She says, I hope no place you can find him. They call him a traitor. The son says, you lie, you shag-eared villain. Murderer says, what, you egg? And then we have this awfulness to this little kid. And this awful ending scene where he begs his mother to run away. She exits crying murder, followed by the murderers burying the son's body. Oh, really awful scene. I can't even look at the words. Let's move on. Let's do scene 3, which is really long, but I'm going to kind of skim through it and just give you the gist of it, okay? This is got a really long conversation. Now we cut to England, where they're in the court of England, in Edward's court, and Macduff is talking to Malcolm, okay? And they're talking about Scotland, all right? And Macduff is telling him what's going on there. And we don't have to do all of this super carefully. Like I said, this is kind of a tedious scene that comes from this historical account that Shakespeare studied and used as a source material to write this play, where Macduff and Malcolm are kind of making this plan. Basically, what's happening here, some great parts here. Macduff says, bleed, bleed, poor country. He's kind of lamenting what's so awful about Scotland at the time. Malcolm, though, is not sure if Macduff is loyal to Macbeth or not, and so he's kind of not really just saying, "Yeah, let's get Macbeth," because he's afraid that Macduff is a spy. And where he's saying, when Macduff is trying to get him to come do that, he's saying, if I became king, it would be worse. Because I'm bad. And he said, like, I'm a bad guy. I have all these vices. I have all these bad qualities. Okay. Malcolm says, yeah, I guess that he is bloody. Macduff is like, nobody could be more evil than Macbeth. Okay. And Malcolm's like, I don't know. I'm pretty bad. I have all these kinds of sins, about what would be bad about me being king. And this is all a lie. Malcolm's a good guy. He's kind of testing out Macduff to see if Macduff is loyal to Macbeth or not. Macduff doesn't have patience for that. He's like, no, Macbeth is the worst. We're going to skip down to here. Again, this is kind of a really long scene, but let's go to the part where he kind of wins him back. Macduff, again, is kind of grieving for Scotland. Okay. Malcolm's continuing to pretend that he's not fit to govern. And Macduff is like, again, there's great lines here about his love of his country, with its untitled tyrant, bloody sceptered. When shall thou see thy wholesome days again? Okay, he's just wishing for Scotland to be back. He's so upset that he's banished from it just because it's so awful. And now Malcolm tells him kind of that he was faking it. Okay, and he says, I was doing false speaking to try to see if you were a pawn of devilish Macbeth. Okay, so they figure that out. This doctor comes in, is talking. There's a reference here to what's called the evil, and that the miraculous work of the good king. People thought that the king had I forget if it's called the king's touch, I think, where since a king was supposed to be chosen by God, could touch somebody who's sick and instantly cure them. And that was something that people believed kings could do. So this is another kind of bone that Shakespeare's throwing to King James, as the idea of kings are holy, kings are sent by God, killing a king is the worst thing in the world. This is all just kind of praise for the king, and Shakespeare trying to compliment King James. Let's go down to here where it gets really interesting, because Ross shows up. I don't know if he ran all the way from Scotland to England, but somehow he's in this next scene now, made his way all the way to England. after being, remember, at Lady Macduff's castle, and he left before the massacre, but he of course knows about it. And so now we know from the fact that he comes to England, where Ross's loyalties lay. Ross, who has always been really loyal to the king, now is showing up here with these, rebels, really. So Macduff says, look who's here. Malcolm kind of recognizes him. They realize who he is. Macduff says, stand Scotland where it did. Okay, now this whole scene is really intense because Ross has the news of the massacre of Macduff's family, and he now has to tell Macduff. Alas, poor country, almost afraid to know itself, it cannot be called our mother, but our grave, where nothing but who knows nothing is once seen to smile, where sighs and groans and shrieks that rent the air are made not marked, where violent sorrow seems a modern ecstasy. The dead man's knell is there scarce asked for who, and good men's lives expire before the flowers in their caps, dying or ere they sicken. Beautiful lines to describe how awful things are in Scotland. Okay. Malcolm says, what's the newest grief? What's the latest tragedy? All right. And Ross says, well, each minute seems a new one. And now you can see he doesn't want to say it. Now, even more painful, Macduff asks this. And Ross first says that she's well. And then he asks this. And he says, well, too. And look at Macduff. The tyrant has not battered at their peace. So he does suspect that maybe Macbeth was going to come after his castle. Does that tell you about Macduff? I don't know. But he's asking, are you sure they're fine? Because he knows that he didn't go to the banquet. He knows that he then left for England. Word got around about that probably. So he's probably can guess that Macbeth is after him. The tyrant has not battered at their peace. And Ross says, no, they were well at peace when I did leave them. Oh, okay. See what he's doing there? Yeah. So again, why? Why not just tell him here? Why be riddling about this? He's being, and Macduff, can tell that he's not giving away a lot of his speech. This word, is not a bad word. We don't use this word anymore. But it means that he's being kind of stingy with his words. He's not saying everything he wants to say. And he says, just tell me what's going on. So then Ross says, well, they ran a rumor, blah, blah, blah. I saw the powers now is, he just still doesn't say it, but he says to Malcolm, your eye in Scotland would create soldiers, make our women fight to doff their dire distresses. Okay. So he's kind of changes the subject and tries to make sure that Malcolm will come back and fight for Scotland. Okay. Now Malcolm tells them the news, we're coming. Okay. Gracious England hath lent us good Seward and 10,000 men. And nobody's better than Seward as a general on the battlefield. So that's the good news. Okay. What I would answer this comfort with the leg. He's saying, well, I wish I could have bad news here. He still has to give Macduff the news that he's not telling him. Okay. I have words that would be howled out in the desert air where hearing should not latch them. I have things you shouldn't say. And Macduff is trying to ask, it's like 20 questions here. Is it something for the general cause, or is it a fee grief due to some single breast? Is it bad for the country, or is it bad for one person? Tell me something. Okay. And then finally, Ross says, the main part pertains to you alone. Macduff says, if it be mine, keep it not from me. Quickly, let me have it. You can tell something bad. He said, all right, just give it to me. Ross begs him, let not your ears despise my tongue forever. And now he guesses at it. The heaviest sound they've ever heard. And here it is, the actual news. Your castle is surprised, your wife and babe savagely slaughtered. Now, what's really interesting to me here, and I'll probably have you guys work on this in class, is Macduff's how Shakespeare, the poet, writes, what for me and for most people would be the worst news ever, the worst news you could possibly imagine hearing, okay? And how do you write that grief? How do you write that response to really match the feeling of it, where the people in the audience just witnessed it? They saw it on stage. And we didn't even see Duncan be murdered. But we saw this, okay? So we're feeling it. We just saw it. And now we see the man who left his wife and kids to be vulnerable to that attack. We see him get the news. So what's his response? It's not this. This is Malcolm. So that tells us that Macduff is silent right now. Malcolm says, merciful heaven. Okay? Merciful heaven. Now he says, what, man? Never pull your hat upon your brows. Give sorrow words. Don't just hang your head. Speak. The grief that does not speak whispers the overfraught heart and bids it break. What's that advice? Yeah, if you don't talk about your grief, it's going to break your heart, so you have to talk. Is that good advice? I don't know. Like, we'll give the guy a minute, right? Give him a second. This is the first thing he says. So let's think about what his emotions are there, right? Are children too? He tells them, yeah. And then he says, and I must be from thence. My wife killed too? I've said so, yeah. Malcolm again tries to comfort him. He's like, let's make this our revenge. Macduff is not there yet. He says he has no children. There's two things this line could mean. I've read both. Some say he's talking about, well, what do you think? Who's he talking about there? He could be, yeah, it makes sense to say he's talking about Macbeth. You know, how dare he kill my kids? He doesn't even have any kids. But he could be talking about Malcolm. Malcolm doesn't have kids either. And maybe that explains why he says this insensitive thing. You know? Hey, don't waste time crying about them. Come on, let's go fight. It's like he doesn't have kids, he doesn't get it. I need to grieve this tragedy, okay? Did you say all? You know, all my pretty chickens and their dam in one fell swoop, another one of Shakespeare's phrases that has lasted when you do everything at once in one fell swoop. I love this part. Love this part. Malcolm says, dispute it like a man. What's he mean? You know, fight. Grab your sword. If you want to fight Macbeth now and get back at him, do it like a man. And to what me sounds like kind of a progressive, you know, for 1600 view of manliness. Macduff says, I shall do so, but I must also feel it as a man. Yeah, I get that. You know, people say, I feel like Shakespeare, maybe I'm off here, but I feel like Shakespeare is kind of making a comment here about what it means to be a man. And that instead of just being like, rah, rah, I want to kill people, like to be a man also means you have to feel something for, you know, God forbid the most awful news like this. He's going to feel this as a man. So give him a minute to grieve it. Okay? Did heaven look on and would not take their part? Sinful Macduff, he's talking to himself here. They were all struck for thee. You see what emotion he's feeling there. Not that I am, not for their own demerits, but for mine. Fell slaughter on their souls. Okay? Malcolm, again, let this be the whetstone of your sword. Let this sharpen your sword. Let grief convert to anger. Blunt not the heart. Enrage it. Now, finally, Macduff realizes, and so much for my progressive gender stuff, because now he's like, I could play the woman with mine eyes, which means cry, and braggart with my tongue. Gentle heavens, cut short all intermission. Okay, front to front. Bring thou this fiend of Scotland and myself. All right, he wants to face him, face to face, within my sword's length, and set him. If he escape, heaven forgive him too. Now Macduff is geared up for fighting. Okay, all right, Malcolm's ready now. This tune goes manly. All right, maybe it's not so progressive. Our power is ready. Our lack is nothing but our leave. All we have left to do is do it, okay? Macbeth is ripe for shaking, and powers above put on their instruments. Receive what cheer you may. The night is long that never finds the day. Whew. All right, that's the end of Act 4, as you see. So you can see what's coming up in Act 5 is going to be this battle, you know, with England and Seward, Northumberland, and these rebels like Macduff going after our evil fiend of Scotland, Macbeth. All right, there we go. 2 scenes under 20 minutes. Good job. Okay, good job you. Stuck with that. Hope things are making sense. See you next time.